6:47 in the morning. The parking lot is almost empty. Yours is the third car. The fluorescent lights are still warming up. That pale humming kind of light that makes everything look slightly wrong before the day officially starts. You set your bag down, you log in, you begin. Nobody asked you to be here this early. Nobody is watching. Nobody will mention it later. But you've always been this kind of person, the kind who shows up before the meeting starts, who finishes before the deadline, who quietly fixes problems other people haven't noticed yet. You've been this person your whole life. And somewhere, deep in the part of you that still runs on the original software, you believe that meant something, that it had to mean something, that one day the math would catch up, the effort would convert, the account would finally reflect the work. It hasn't. And the part that nobody talks about, the part that keeps you up at 2 a.m. doing math in your head that never comes out right, is that you weren't lazy. You never were. It started the way most things start, not with a lesson, with watching. You watch someone in your family leave before the sun came up and come home after dark. You watch them tired in a way that went deeper than physical, tired in their posture, in how they sat at dinner, in the specific silence they carried into the house with them. The message was never spoken out loud. It didn't need to be. Work hard. And you make it, so you did. In school, you were the student who actually did the reading, who didn't hand things in late, who stayed after class to ask a question nobody else thought to ask, not to impress anyone, just because it seemed like the honest way to do things. And it worked. Good grades came from effort. Extra credit was actually extra. The system was transparent. You put something in, you got something back. That equation felt real because it was real. The problem is what happened when you carried it into a different room. But the first room you walked into felt like confirmation. The first real job felt like the system working exactly the way it was supposed to. You showed up on time. You learned faster than anyone expected. You volunteered for the things nobody wanted. You stayed late on nights when staying late cost you something personal. And your manager noticed. They said your name in meetings. They gave you more responsibility. They told you directly, sincerely, that people like you were hard to find. At your 6-month review, you got a raise. Small, a few $100s a year, barely visible in your paycheck, but the feeling was enormous. It confirmed everything you already believed. Effort converts. So you pushed harder. You took on more. You became the person the team called when something actually needed to get done. Not discussed, not rescheduled, done. You told yourself, this is how it builds. Slowly, but it builds. What you didn't know was that the building had already stopped. The second year, something quiet changed. Not dramatically, not in a way you could name. Your responsibilities grew, the projects got larger, the expectations became something you were simply supposed to meet now, not something anyone acknowledged when you did. You stopped getting pulled aside after a job well done, not because they stopped noticing, but because your performance had become the baseline. You were dependable, so dependability was no longer remarkable. The raise at your annual review was 3%, the same as everyone else. You did the math in your head. You didn't say anything out loud. You told yourself, this is the part where patience matters. This is where you prove something. Keep going. So you kept going. By the third year, you had absorbed the workload of 2 roles, not officially. It just happened the way these things always happen. A task here, a responsibility there, until the shape of your job looked nothing like the description you were hired for. Nobody updated your title. Nobody adjusted your pay. Nobody said, we see what's happening here. They just kept giving you more. And you kept taking it because you genuinely believed that was what building towards something looked like. Sacrifice now, return later. The return was always later. Later kept moving, and then you noticed him. His name doesn't matter. He came in around 9, sometimes 9:15. He took long lunches. He had a way of being in a meeting without really being in a meeting. Smiling, nodding, saying things that sounded confident, but never committed to anything specific. You'd watch him leave at 5 on the dot every day, like clockwork. You never thought much about it. Some people were just like that until the afternoon you saw his offer letter on the printer. Not intentionally. You weren't looking. You were picking up your own document, and it was right there, face up, still warm. His base salary was $14,000, more than yours. You stood there for a moment. The printer was still running. Someone was laughing in the hallway. He had been there 8 months. You had been there 3 years. You walked back to your desk. You sat down. You didn't say anything to anyone. But something in the original equation, the one you had been running your entire life, made a sound you had never heard before, like a crack, and something you didn't know could crack. You told yourself it was one data point, but you started looking differently after that. You started paying attention in a new way. You noticed who got pulled into leadership conversations and who didn't. You noticed who got budget approved and who got told to wait until next quarter, who got flexibility and who got monitored. And the pattern wasn't about performance, it was about something else, something nobody had ever named for you. The people moving forward weren't doing the most work. You were managing how their work was perceived. They knew which projects had visibility, which meetings had decision makers in the room, which problems, if solved, would attach their name to something people remembered. They understood that effort is invisible unless it is positioned correctly. You had been pouring effort into a room with no windows. Real effort, consistent, exhausting. The kind that costs you sleep and weekends and things you told yourself you'd get back to later. But effort alone is not a strategy, it's just effort. The first month after you understood this, you tried to change. You tried to speak up more in meetings, to volunteer for higher visibility work, to learn the language the room was actually speaking. It felt wrong, unnatural, like performing something you didn't believe in. By the third month, you stopped trying to change and you just started feeling the weight of it, the weight of years of output with no compounding return, the weight of being the most reliable person in a system that never rewarded reliability the way it rewarded strategy. You sat down one evening and did the real math. Salary increase over 3 years, roughly 11%. Inflation over the same period, higher than that in real terms. You had gone backward, and then came the day the equation stopped completely. It wasn't a dramatic moment, it never is. It was a Tuesday. Ordinary light. Someone had brought donuts and left the box open in the break room. The coffee was burnt. Someone had a call on speaker in the corner. Your manager called you in. The promotion you had been quietly, carefully, patiently building toward, the one that had been implied for over a year, was going to someone else. He was good with people, they said. Strong relationships across the organization. You recognized the description immediately. It was the 915 guy. Your manager thanked you for everything you'd contributed, said you were invaluable, said he didn't know what the team would do without you. He meant it. You could tell he meant it. And somehow that made it worse because invaluable and unreplaceable, in the language of most systems, just means stay where you are. Keep holding it up. Don't go anywhere. It doesn't mean forward. You nodded. You thanked him. You went back to your desk. You opened your laptop. You did not cry. You were past crying. You sat there in the quiet devastation of someone who has finally understood something they cannot ununderstand. The hardest worker in the room doesn't automatically win. The hardest worker in the room sometimes just becomes the room's foundation, load-bearing, invisible, essential. But foundations don't get promoted. They just hold everything else up. You had built something, just not for yourself. You didn't quit the next day. You're not that kind of person. You never were. But something changed, not loudly, the way real things change, slowly and then all at once, and then permanently. You stopped volunteering for everything, not out of bitterness, out of clarity. There's a difference, even though they can look the same from the outside. You started asking a question you had never thought to ask before. What does this work actually buy me? Not in a cynical way, in a precise way. If the answer was money, you started calculating whether the money was proportionate to the output. If the answer was skill, You started asking whether it was a skill with a market rate, something transferable, something that would be worth more somewhere it could actually be seen. If the answer was neither, you started learning how to say no without explanation, without apology. Just no, you didn't stop working hard. That part isn't changeable. It's wired into you. You couldn't remove it if you tried, but you stopped treating hard work like currency in a system that wasn't honoring the exchange rate, because that's what you had been doing for years, depositing into an account that had a different owner. You started understanding something that took years and real cost before you could see it clearly. Effort is not the same as leverage. Reliability is not the same as value, at least not in the language most systems speak. The people who moved forward weren't working less. They were working with direction. They were building something portable: reputation, relationships, visibility, skills with addresses. They were making sure their effort could be found. Yours had been anonymous. You couldn't recover those years. That was true. And you let it be true without trying to zaw off in it or reframe it into something easier to hold. But you were still here, still capable of doing the work, still honestly one of the hardest workers in any room you walked into. The difference now was that you were going to make sure the room could see you, not perform, not play a role you didn't believe in, just stop disappearing by default. There's a version of the story where you become someone different, harder, colder, someone who stops caring because caring cost them too much for too long. That's not what happened. What happened was smaller and more permanent. You learned that the belief you started with, that work is the answer, was never wrong. It was just incomplete. Work is part of the answer. But work alone, without direction, without visibility, without understanding what the system actually rewards, work alone is just effort. And effort, unpositioned, gets absorbed. You know that now. Not because someone sat you down and explained it, because you paid for it over years in the currency of time. And the quiet that comes after that kind of understanding isn't defeat, it's not bitterness, it's just what clarity feels like when it finally arrives without the noise.